Joanne set a thick envelope on my oak kitchen table and called it transition money. I slid it open, counted $11,000, and let the number sit beside the value he refused to see, a $4.8 million ranch and my old Mustang. The coffee was too bitter, the room smelled of cedar, and the second hand on his watch flashed when he moved. I noted the time in my pocket notebook. I did not argue. I watched, and I remembered. I kept the envelope between us like a doorstop. His shoes clicked on the tile, all shiny, intent, and hurry. I breathed once, steady, tasting the bitterness and dust. I asked one question precise as a pin. When did I sign anything? He stared past me at the window, at the wind running the pasture grass, and said I'd been foggy with pneumonia, and we had agreed. My pen rested on the notebook line. I did not fill it. He slipped a glossy Westridge brochure from his folder and set it near the salt shaker, a picture of staged kitchens and empty views. "It's a better fit for you now," he said. I wrote down his license plate and the time he left and the tiny smudge his thumb printed on the brochure edge. A fly clicked at the light while his car dropped dust along the Caliche Drive. The money waited quiet as a dare. I capped my pen and closed the notebook. I set the envelope in the center of the table like evidence and took my old leather folder from the pantry hook. The table would hold the money until it could hold the truth. I locked the back door, picked up my keys, and chose my field records, not shouting. Paper leaves footprints. Texas law leaves doors if you know which ones open with a polite knock. Outside, the sun hammered the gravel heat, shimmering above the Caliche like a veil. Live oaks flicked shadows on the pasture fence as I drove toward Blanco. I kept my hand steady at 10 and 2. By the time the courthouse dome rose above sycamores, my pulse matched the turn signal ready. Darlie at the clerk's counter knew the ranch by name. Most people in Blanco do. Her fluorescent lights hummed honest as a hymn. I told her I needed to see any recent activity on deeds or powers of attorney with my name. She clicked keys, frowned, and asked me to spell my middle initial twice. Then she turned the monitor slightly so I could see an access log from last week. The IP address resolved to an Austin office suite. The suite number matched Joranne's. "Print and stamp," I asked. She nodded, already reaching for the seal. While the printer warmed, she said, "I'm sorry, Miss Mora. I wasn't sorry yet." She pressed the seal. The paper sang, "We flagged any deed or power of attorney with my name as under review." Darlie showed me the form. I initialed, dated, and kept a copy. We ordered certified copies of everything touched in the last month and asked that the access log be notarized. I asked about timestamps, user IDs, and who could retrieve sealed files. She answered each point as if reading off a clean shelf procedure, not gossip. When she paused, I asked if prior versions were kept. They were with version numbers and edit trails. She wrote the statute. I said it with the request, building a spine, one small bone at a time. Okay, on a wooden bench outside the records room, I opened my notebook and made a ledger of the years. Pancakes before dawn when he had early practice. The braces we paid for month by month. That night, we drove to the ER because of the broken wrist and how he squeezed my hand without shame. Field trips Cleet's rent on his first apartment when the internship didn't. I wrote each memory like a receipt and totaled the column with a calm pen. No tears, not because I am steel, but because I prefer ink. I let the ache sit beneath the numbers, quiet as a bruise. A clock clicked, seconds. When the total reached the edge, I drew a line and closed the book. I texted him one line, "We'll speak Friday." No accusations, no questions, nothing for him to push against. I did not mention the log or the stamps or the notary's neat block letters. Let him keep the story in his head long enough to rehearse it for me. Let him think the closing was still on the calendar, bright as a promise. Silence is a kind of leash if you know where to tie it. I set an alarm for Thursday night to remind myself to say very little. I scrolled until I found the photo of him at 8, with chocolate on his chin, proud of a lopsided cake. I breathed through the sting and saved the breath for later. The courthouse door swung and shut a hinge like a small bell. Near noon. The hill country heat lay over the road like a sleeping dog as I drove back. Cedar and limestone and wide sky, Robert used to say the land kept its own stern Bible. At the house, the porch stones radiated the morning back at me. Fence lines we stretched together held straight and true a habit we taught into the wire. Inside, I set the envelope on the table again beside a clean legal pad titled, in black ink, what the record says. I dated the first page, or 5/19/2025. Under that, I wrote 3 bullets envelope log notarized copies. The pad caught the light from the window and a stripe of dust crossed it. I poured water, not coffee. I needed clarity. The kitchen ticked with fridge and clock. Linked to next chapter, I traced the signature back to my son's office and decided to play along. Friday would be my stage, and silence my script. Fine. Continuing the content of the previous chapter. By sunset, I was in Lyle's garage eyeing a fake bill. Lyle's garage sat 2 blocks off the Johnson City Square, a low cinder-block bay that smelled of hot rubber and cedar dust. He met me at the roll-up door with a nod and no fuss. Under the fluorescence, cherry-red Mustang glowed like a heartbeat. Lyle set a folder on the hood and eased out a single sheet. "Bill of sale," he said. My name crouched in blue ink at the bottom, the loops too tight, the downstrokes timid. Robert used to tease that I pressed a pen like I was setting fence posts. This mark did not belong to me. He tapped the header. Buyer, a Houston collector, the kind who trailers cars to climate-controlled barns. Amount $20,000 even. There's also a wire Lyle added flipping to a printout. A bank logo, a confirmation number, a date stamp from Friday at 3:06 p.m. The notary block bore an embossed circle that photographed handsomely and existed nowhere in the county ledger. Lyle had checked before I arrived. It's a rubber stamp service out of Dallas that folded in 2018, he said. He walked me through the metadata scan time device model office suite number that matched Joran's. I wrote each point the way you tie a gate, snug, simple, secure. We rolled the Mustang into a locked bay, the steel door shuddering down with a sound like distant thunder. I read the odometer and wrote the mileage in my ledger, then took a dated photo on Lyle's shop tablet. The cabin smelled of sun-warmed leather and the ghost of Robert's aftershave, cedar and citrus. I set the keys in a pouch, sealed it, and initialed the seam. Lyle killed the overheads and left one trouble light burning a small moon over the hood. "Back roads for your truck," he said. "No need to parade past the square." I traced a route on the paper map and folded it twice. On the bench by the tool chest, I spread a legal pad and drafted the words I would use with my son. Short sentences only, nothing he could twist. I'm overwhelmed. Maybe Westridge makes sense. Let's make Friday simple. I practiced saying them aloud until they sounded like I was speaking to a neighbor about weather, not theft. If the call ever found its way to a recorder, I wanted verbs that sat still and nouns that did not swell. Breathing through my nose in for 4, out for 6, the way I had when Jasper was a colicky baby and patience had to be measured. I dialed from the open bay. Joran answered on the second ring voice, bright and polished, a broker in a lobby. I told him Friday worked for me. I said I appreciated him handling the messy parts, and I could almost hear the shoulders drop on the other end. He named a time and a conference room. I repeated both calm as a clerk. I wrote the exact minute in my ledger and let silence hold the rest. People tell you what they need to say into a quiet line. He filled the quiet with confidence and a little triumph. I let him. Lyle assigned a watcher for midweek and handed me a list of clocks to set the buyer's ETA, the title search window, the best hour to catch the bank officer at his desk. "You talk less than any client I've had," he said, not unkindly. "It helps." We agreed on rules I would not argue with Joran before Friday. I would document every call, every message, every minute. If the car moved, Lyle's man would move too. We shook on it like neighbors over a cattle guard the old way that still means something in this county. Before I left, I sat one more minute behind the Mustang's wheel. The steering rim was smooth from Robert's hands from mine from years we drove it on Sundays, with the radio low. The car was not a trophy. It was a vow we had kept through lean months and long recoveries. I whispered that vow to the empty passenger seat and locked the door with a clean metallic click. Then I turned off the trouble light and let the bay go dim, like closing a book you know by heart. The sky was the color of hammered copper when I turned onto the ranch road. Heat shimmered over the caliche. At home, the limestone porch held the day like a kiln. The envelope still sat centered on the oak table, its corners square to the grain. I opened a fresh page. Vehicle sale false instrument. Under it, a list notarized access log, wire trace, confirm notary closure, buyer contact only through counsel. The kitchen smelled of coffee gone bitter and dust warmed by sun. I wrote the date and time, and I did not move the envelope. Evidence belongs where the light can find it. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Marcia's subject line. Friday is his trap. Here's mine. I attached Lyle's scans, the bill of sale. The wire slipped the screenshots of the notary mismatch and asked for a morning slot. I added one sentence I prefer, conservation over liquidation if there is a lawful path. Then I closed the lid and listened to the wind in the cedar, steady as cattle in a barn at night. In the quiet, I could hear Robert's laugh the way you hear water in a pipe, not present, but moving toward you. Sleep came in short pieces. Each time I woke, I pictured the conference room door, the gleam of a pen, the way Joran's watch had caught the kitchen light when he set down the envelope and called it transition money. I began to feel the shape of Friday not as a cliff, but as a bridge. I had built myself, plank by careful plank. Before dawn, I walked the fence line with a flashlight, hearing the low talk of cattle and the scrape of fox in the brush. The ranch was still mine in the ways that matter chores, gates names of low spots that hold water after rain. I touched the cedar post Robert set the year we paid off the tractor and promised that paper would not erase labor. Then I went inside and sharpened a pencil. Some fights are won in graphite. By morning, my capacity exam was on the calendar and Marcia had the conservation paperwork ready for recording. I left before the birds finished arguing with the dawn. Legal folder buckled in the passenger seat thermos, steady between maps, I took the river road toward San Marcos. The plan stayed small and hard. Prove what my mind can do, then put it in ink where no salesman's smile can reach. The ranch rolled off in the mirrors, fence lines, Robert and I stretched cedar that always returns. I kept my breathing even and my speed lawful. No speeches today. Proof first, then the locks go on the land. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, 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 steady. Dr. Patel met me with a clipboard and a calm that didn't need polishing. I signed the consent, full name printed slow, then answered the ordinary Gates today's date, the address I've mailed from for 30 years, the name of the president. He asked about my pneumonia last winter, the medicines, the blood pressure that wakes early. No drama, no pleading. I told the truth the way you tell a fence post straight level, and once. He nodded, noting what he needed, making space for the rest. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady. Steady, 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 steady. He set a timer. Trails to connect letters to recall after a story, a clock to draw. I pictured feed rotation the way the cattle learn your rhythm before you learn theirs. Serial sevens dropped like fence staples into a bucket. I sketched noon with a clean hand added numbers in their lanes, then folded the paper edge to show planning. He asked a puzzle about errands and time. I routed it as if the well pump were down again. Nothing fancy, just working parts oiled and steady the way a ranch keeps time. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, 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 steady. When the last page settled, Dr. Patel uncapped his pen and spoke plain. There was no evidence of impairment, he said. My attention held my judgment intact, my planning sound. A formal letter would follow within 2 days, but he wrote a brief note for my attorney and for any title desk that might squint at my age. I asked for copies to email. He printed them while I waited the machine warm and honest as toast. I thanked him for measuring what others preferred to assume away. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, 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 steady. Marcia's office smelled like paper and rainfall. She spread a map of the ranch, her finger tracing the 85% that would hold in perpetuity. Pastures stay pasture. No subdivision, no stacked roofs, no glittering gates. A life estate reserved to me so my keys stay mine while I breathe. The remaining 15% would be a gift set aside for Lacey by separate deed, after when the dust settled and the story grew quieter. I read and I asked, and I understood. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, 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 steady. We initialed exhibits legal descriptions that knew the land better than gossip does. I signed before the notary right-hand still name, consistent breath, slow. Marcia scanned sent, and we watched the screen. Minutes later, the return arrived bearing the clerk's stamp, the time, the document number, the square word, recorded. It felt like turning a deadbolt. Not a shout, not a victory march, just the clean click of a door that will not yield when someone pretty says please. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, steady, steady. Marcia forwarded notice of the conservation restrictions to the title company and the developer that has been sniffing at the fence line. She attached the physician's note and my affidavit affirming that any deed or power of attorney signed without me is a ghost. She set a verification call with the title officer for tomorrow noon and copied me in. The fight could move to neutral ground now, phones, records, clocks where charm trips and facts stand up. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, steady. Back at the ranch, the kitchen had the patient light of late afternoon. I copied the document number into my legal pad and printed the stamped first page. It slid under the fridge magnet with the hurricane shelter list, a simple kind of altar. The envelope with 11,000 sat exactly where I left it, centered like a dare. I did not touch it. The table keeps its witnesses better than people do, and I was content to let it watch. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady, steady. I sent one text Friday, still fine. Then I silenced the phone and read Lyle's update. The Houston buyer planned to arrive tomorrow at noon, receipt in hand, and confidence borrowed from my son. I pictured the barn empty to him and full to me, and the small recorder sleeping in my pocket ready. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. Steady. By noon tomorrow, a stranger from Houston would ask for a car that no longer sat in my barn, and my recorder would already be running. The clock was done doing favors. Paper would keep the time for me. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine. At 9, I would sign the IME consent and watch Marcia slide the easement draft across her desk. Tomorrow's plan is simpler. Let them speak while the tape breathes, and let the words stamped on the page do the talking recorded. I noted the mile markers the way small facts make a spine, a dust plume braided above the caliche like a horse's tail. The silver SUV turned in at 1140 tires, whispering over the cattle guard. A man in a linen jacket climbed out with a manila folder tucked neat under his arm. "Ma'am," he said, voice courteous, but time tight. He introduced himself as Mr. Harrington from Houston and glanced toward the barn like a man who already owned what he came to fetch. I wiped my hands on my apron, tapped the record icon beneath the fabric, and let the phone sleep where my hands could not fidget. He opened the folder on my porch rail. Wire confirmation on bank letterhead routing and account numbers clear as creek water, a pickup window circled in blue. A note at the bottom read, "Bill of sale on file." I studied the headings, the sequence numbers, the way the ink pooled at the tail of a 7. A contact block labeled J. Montgomery sat under the cellar line. I did not lift a finger toward the keys. "Would you mind calling your contact?" I asked. "Put it on speaker so we can all be efficient." He obliged. The phone rang twice, then Duran's voice snapped bright and hurried the tone he uses when he believes control is proof of competence. "Yeah," he said. Harrington introduced himself, referenced the noon pickup, the verified deposit, and the seller's readiness. There was a pause, a shaped breath, then my son's words cut clean. "Tell her to hand over the keys. We'll split the 75 after closing." The sentence landed whole in my apron pocket, pure as a plumb line. I said nothing. Silence is the cleanest tool in a dirty room. "Thank you," I told Mr. Harrington, as if we'd just confirmed the weather report. I stepped into the shade, the cedar's resin sweet in the heat, and asked permission to photograph his deposit slip for my attorney. He agreed. I explained there were title irregularities under review and that I would not see him drive back to Houston empty if I could help it. "Our counsel will contact your bank today," I said. "We'll aim to protect your funds while the paperwork catches up to the facts." He listened the way men do when the story on the page doesn't match the story they were told. My phone buzzed. Lyle's name slid across the screen with 3 images in a row, a text thread Mr. Harrington had forwarded a minute earlier. "Duran, can we move closing up? Thursday is cleaner. A follow-up need vehicle off property today." Timestamps sat like witnesses. We saved the screenshots to a shared drive, tagged the numbers, and noted the minute. The sand keeps time if you know how to read where the wind has been. I turned back to the buyer. "Mr. Harrington, I will not release a car I did not sell," I said, voice even. "But I'll make sure your bank hears from my attorney before 3. You did not deserve this." Relief loosened the set of his shoulders, the kind that comes when someone removes the performance from a business deal. He gave me his banker's direct line and slid his card across the rail. "Ma'am," he said, "I appreciate straight talk." Inside, I placed his deposit copy beside the envelope with $11,000 and opened my ledger. On a fresh line, I wrote S6 live audio, split 75 after closing. S18 push for Thursday, request vehicle removal. Tasks call Marcia, prep bank conference, preserve audio, export text images. The envelope stayed in the center like a stone in a creek water of the day, splitting around it and rejoining below. I called Marcia and laid out the noon theater, the speakerphone admission, the buyer's deposit, the texts pushing the goalposts. I sent the audio clip and the screenshots. "Notify title and Sunrise," I said. "Attach the easement stamp and Dr. Patel's note. We need a funds hold by close of business." She answered with times. 3 p.m. conference with the banker, she said. "I'll have compliance on. We'll memorialize this in a letter to the title officer." The house breathed with its usual discipline, the clock in the hall, the fridge humming, the cedar sighing at the porch posts. I washed 2 coffee cups that weren't dirty and let the faucet run until the water shifted from warm to honest cold. Outside, the SUV idled, then turned dust-lifting once more into the noon glare. I didn't wave. Good men leave when you give them a clean next step. Before I hung up, Marcia asked for one more detail. I read her the exact minute of Duran's line from my call log and the caller ID string on Harrington's phone. She chuckled without humor. "Clean enough to frame," she said. Lyle pinged again. "Tail in place buyer agreeable to a bank call Thursday attempt documented." I set alarms 1:40 to prep 2:55 to dial in 30 for the banker. Then I walked the fence to the south lot, counting cedar posts like beads until my breath matched the land's pace again. Easy by morning titles search would surface the easement stamp, where any buyer could see it, and the $4.8 million closing my son bragged about would fold in on itself like a card table with a bad leg. Paper is slow only to the impatient. To the patient, it is a river with banks. Continuing the content of the previous chapter, at 8:12 a.m., title's update hit Marcia's inbox. Easement recorded. Development use prohibited. Recommend halt. I sharpened a pencil and dated the page. At 8:12 a.m., Marcia forwarded the update from title. The subject line read like a stop sign, easement recorded, development use prohibited. Owner's policy cannot be issued without easement release impossible. Recommend halt. I printed the email and slid it under the fridge magnet beside the page that said recorded. The ranch hummed around me, the pump, the fridge, the wind-steady proof that land listens better than people. Speaker on coffee cooling, I dialed the number Marcia sent. Carmen introduced herself voice firm in the way of someone who reads fine print for a living. Paige joined from escrow. Carmen explained what the stamp already told me. A conservation easement binds successors. Intended development use cannot be insured. No owner's policy means no closing. Paige added that escrow won't move a penny without a policy. Please send a written halt notice to all parties, I said. Copy my counsel. Marcia's consolidated packet landed moments later. The stamped first pages, Dr. Patel's capacity note with today's date, the county access log, showing an Austin office IP, the title of the audio clip from yesterday, Split the 75, and Mr. Harrington's deposit screenshot. The subject line was clean, do not proceed. Paper gathered and squared can be a spine. Sunrise's lawyer joined next. Wesley's tone was clipped and professional, the kind meant to close doors without slamming them. He asked for 5 minutes to confer. When he returned, his voice had changed a half shade. Sunrise withdraws from Friday, he said. We will instruct escrow to unwind and seek return of deposits from Joanne Montgomery. No threat, no drama. Just the sound a tent makes when a stake pulls free. A new email pinged. Wesley had forwarded an internal thread, my son writing, that he had full POA that mother is moving out Thursday and that title work is routine. Attached was the same forged transfer PDF Lyle photographed in the garage. I highlighted the dates that fell after my IME consent and after the easement recording. I did not forward it to Joanne. I filed it where it would matter. Paige outlined the unwind mechanics for Mr. Harrington's wire. Administrative hold, bank notifications, a mutual cancellation form queued and unsigned. Marcia asked to conference Mr. Harrington's banker at 3 to place a courtesy hold pending fraud review. Paige read a case number for tracking. I repeated it back then, wrote it down twice, once in ink, once in pencil, the way Robert taught me when something must not be lost. My phone lit with an unknown number. I answered because avoiding storms never kept a roof on. You ruined this, Joanne said. His voice was brittle, a glass that had already cracked. You can't live out there alone. I logged the time. Title halted, I said. Speak with Sunrise. He tried to pull me into the old loop, explain, defend, apologize for making it hard. No, I said and hung up first. The kitchen returned to its ordinary music. At 3, we joined the banker. I stated my name and thanked him for his care of a customer who had been misled. We requested a temporary hold on the Mustang deposit pending documentation. Mr. Harrington agreed to provide his wiring details to confirm the source. Paige logged the call and noted the internal case number again. Compliance asked for the easement recording and the audio title. Marcia emailed both before the line went quiet. The banker promised to escalate within the hour. I set an alarm for 4:15 and placed the phone face down. While the alarms waited, I tidied the table the way I do before guests stacked the printed emails, squared the notepad, centered the envelope with its mean weight of 11,000. I made a fresh pot of coffee and let it sit until the smell reached the doorway. The dogs slept hard by the back door, their paws twitching at whatever they chased in dreams. I opened the screen to let the breeze move the heat, then sat and read the halt memorandum slowly, word by careful word, the same way I read my husband's will until the sentences stopped trying to scare me and started to serve me. When the alarm chirped, the banker emailed that the hold was active, pending fraud review, funds not to move without compliance sign-off. Mr. Harrington replied with a brief thank you and a copy of his deposit receipt for my records. Paige forwarded the mutual cancellation draft, blank and waiting. Marcia answered with 2 words, good positioning. I closed my eyes and let the quiet roll a moment, then saved every attachment twice. When the calls ended, I opened my legal pad and wrote the day in sequence: S7 policy denied, title halt. S8 Sunrise withdraws, misrepresentation emails, escrow unwind in process, buyer funds shield request placed. I added lines for follow-up, obtain certified copy of the halt memo, request bank confirmation of hold, preserve phone log, export audio to a second drive. I left the envelope with 11,000 untouched, centered where I could see it from the sink. A marker, not a mercy. The ranch light fell across the table like a level line, and for the first time this week, my shoulders dropped an inch. Near sundown, tires eased over the cattle guard. A sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop by the porch steps, lights off, engine low. The deputy lifted a hand in a neighborly way, a paper folded in his palm. Behind him, the wind shifted through the cedar. My phone vibrated. Lyle's text read, "Notary commission on Joran's deed expired last year." I looked at the envelope, the magnet, the ledger, and the land that still held. Some things unwind, some things hold. I exhaled. Tires powdered the gravel before the porch light fully woke. I stepped out with 2 sweating bottles of water. "Evening, deputy," I said. He touched the brim of his hat, scanning the porch and the fields. "Ma'am, we received a call about your welfare." I set Dr. Patel's note on my folder and let the paper speak before I did. "Let's sit in the shade," I offered. The cedar creaked as we settled. He read in silence, lips moving a fraction, with the line that mattered no evidence of impairment. I added the day's spine titles: halt, Sunrise's withdrawal, the easement page stamped, recorded, magneted on my fridge. "I'd appreciate your body cam catching the documents in frame," I said. He angled his chest unit toward the table. He glanced toward the drive. Caller identified as a concerned family member. I nodded once. My son Joran. I slid my legal pad across Times names, phone numbers, and the short sentence that anchors a day, what happened, and who saw it. "I'll need an incident number, and if you're willing, the note that I'm oriented and not in distress." His face softened without losing shape. "Yes, ma'am." My phone purred on the table. Lyle's text stacked itself over the quiet, a photo of a notary seal on the deed Joran waved last week, paired with a public lookup page from the Secretary of State. The commission date glared back. "This seal expired last year," I said, turning the screen. The deputy leaned, clicked a photo for the file, then asked me to email the images to the records address on his card. "We'll attach it to your incident. Right channel, right tone." I said more to myself than him. With his nod, I called the Notary Commission's evening line, left a clear message name of the notary document number, dates, my contact. Then I opened the complaint portal, uploaded the forged deed, the access log from the clerk's office, the expired commission image. An auto receipt pinged my email like a small bell. Paper beats panic. The deputy radioed that I was clear at scene. No welfare concern observed. I asked for the steps to request his body cam and CAD notes. He wrote the email for records and a form number on the back of his card, slow enough that I could see each letter anchor. "Attach your capacity letter to the request," he said. "Helps the reviewer place the call." I thanked him and stood, knees popping like old hinges. "That's still open fine." A different number flashed across the screen, Joran again. I let it roll to voicemail while I typed a short email to Marcia. S13 documented. Incident number. Public records request sent. S9 attached expired notary commission with image and lookup. I saved the voicemail to the same folder as the access log and the audio where he promised a split after closing. Order makes room to breathe. Another text lit the corner of the screen. Mr. Harrington. I told him the deputy had verified I was fine, and that counsel would keep working with his bank to shield the deposit until fraud review finished. He replied with thanks and forwarded one more message from Joran, pushing for an earlier handoff. I saved it, then asked him to keep every text, even the ones that felt like gnats. The house settled the way a good horse does, weight through the hip, air through the nose. I centered the envelope on the table, 11,000 in fresh bills meant to soften the theft of a ranch and a car. The legal pad waited. I wrote the day into neat lines, wellness check neutralized, body cam request filed, expired seal reported. I slid the recorded page back under the magnet and listened to the kitchen tick. Deputy Reed rose to go. We shook hands on the porch. If he calls us again, he said, we'll note your capacity on file. I watched the taillights fall down the drive, then turned toward the sink and ran water until it cleared cold. I drank standing up. I'm not a woman who clings to a chair when the floor pitches. I widen my stance and keep my ledger straight. Night pulled tighter. I opened my laptop and filled in the public records form with the incident number, time on scene, and a note that the deputy had filmed the documents at my request. Attach capacity letter easement first page, access log notary images. The send button clicked and the air loosened a notch. I closed the screen and rested my palm on the legal pad. The phone stayed face down when it trembled again. Boundaries aren't bitterness. Fences keep the pasture safe. I set the handset beside the envelope and wrote one more line: I will not be moved by someone else's hurry. A nighthawk cut a soft arc and vanished in the cedar. I carried the dishes to the sink and stacked tomorrow's clean start on the rack. At the door, I paused, listening for anything off a truck that didn't belong, a gate chain that shouldn't sing. The night was ordinary and therefore generous. I locked the knob and settled my keys in the blue bowl Robert turned from Mesquite years ago. The bowl was still solid, still useful, still ours. Some things hold even when someone tries to relabel them. I touched the rim and let that be my last word. By the time the crickets softened, the plan for morning sat finished in my head call, records at 8 to confirm receipt, coordinate with Marcia on the notary complaint, check with Lyle on the tail for any Thursday surprises, ignore anything that smelled like bait. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving the envelope in a small rectangle of moon. Evidence waits well. So do I. I slept. Well. Lacey's voicemail trembled in my ear when the sky paled. I called her back phone on speaker beside the envelope. She sniffled, then listened. I told her the title halt was real. Sunrise had withdrawn, and I was safe in my own house. No shouting, just dates and documents. I asked her to keep an open mind until she could see what I would show a judge. She agreed to answer if the court called and promised to save her father's messages. I reminded her of the fence posts we set last summer, measure twice, drive once. This would be the same, careful, then firm. If probate needed her, she would join by Zoom. "Okay, Grandma," she said, "I'll be there." Marcia rang at dawn, voice crisp. She warned Joran might rush an ex parte guardianship. We would not be late to that door. I opened the folder and stacked proof in order: doctor. Patel's capacity note from yesterday, the recorded easement, the title halt email, the wellness check incident number, and the image of the expired notary seal. Marcia drafted a cover letter to the court coordinator and copied counsel. I kept my voice low and even because facts behave best when handled that way. "Charge the phone, steady the camera, keep answers short," she said. "Ordered and labeled. If papers hit the docket, we'd meet them at the door." By 8:30, Lyle texted that a clerk had seen Joran pacing the probate lobby with blank forms. Minutes later, Daisy confirmed a 9:45 Zoom. I dressed ranch practical clean shirt boots, hair pulled back. I set the laptop at eye level, the folder visible at my elbow. The recorded page and Dr. Patel's note sat on top. Lacey called from her dorm room, a whiteboard behind her with exam dates. She looked too young to be in the middle of this and old enough to choose truth. Marcia slid into a chair off camera and we rehearsed one more time. Answer what is asked. Keep it short. Let the paper do the weight. I steadied my breath-checked audio. Judge Cole admitted us and called the case. Joran appeared and spoke fast. He claimed I mixed up bills, wandered at night, signed what strangers set down, and that the ranch was too much for me alone. Marcia asked to share exhibits. The recorded easement, Dr. Patel's capacity. Note the title halt Sunrise's withdrawal and the wellness check incident. I answered what I was asked, routines by the well feed rotation banking alerts neighbors' names. Marcia displayed the expired notary seal that matched Joran's deed. The judge's eyes cooled. She asked about support. I said my granddaughter speaks with me daily and that counsel and a former deputy help document. Lacey testified orientation and routines intact. Joran tried to interrupt. The judge stopped him. Marcia asked for denial and a caution on misuse. Ruling ex parte denied. Use proper civil channels. Possible fraud referral noted. Minute order by noon, Judge Cole said. I wrote it down. When the screen blinked back to the waiting room, Duran's square vanished. A chat line from his counsel read, "We will advise." I wrote the time in my pad and underlined it once. Marcia asked the clerk to retain access to the audio link and to note admitted exhibits. I texted Deputy Reed the denial for his file and thanked him for yesterday's calm. We turned from flare to paperwork without a wobble. Cicadas started indifferent. When the call ended, Marcia unfolded the deed for Lassie, 15% by legal description, aligned with the easement my life estate reserved. We traced the carve-out on the map, the north pasture, and the old pecans by the draw. "This is stewardship," I said, "not a prize." We read key clauses: no subdivision, no short-term rental structures, only within the AG envelope without mutual consent. The notary verified my ID and watched me sign. Marcia scanned, recorded, and minutes later, the PDF pinged back with a recorded stamp and doc number. I forwarded it to Lacey. She answered from a stairwell. "Grandma." "I'm shaking." I told her shaking is what hands do when they carry something that will outlast us. She breathed a laugh. "I'll guard it," she said. "My right to live here until I'm finished. Done late afternoon." Lacey's little sedan dusted the Caliche Road and turned in. We didn't rush to hug. We walked the fence line instead, boots in step breath easing with the rhythm. I showed her Creek's elbow where the easement protects the willow bank and the shallow where fawns hide. I explained the covenants in plain speech. No carving the land to pieces. No selling the quiet. Keep the water clean. Keep the herd sound. She nodded, jaw set. "If it's ever on me," she said, "I'll keep it right." I told her she already was by listening. We agreed on written rules. No posts about documents. No bait for her father. Any questions go to counsel first. She stood at the gate and squared her shoulders. At the table, I logged the day in neat lines. S10 ex parte denied minute order pending. S11 15% recorded to Lacey Life Estate reserved. I added call times, email subjects, and the doc number on the fridge. The envelope stayed centered where Duran left it. I did not move it. I did not open it. The house settled into its night sounds. The live oaks darkened and cicadas took their shift. At dusk, headlights pooled at the gate. A BMW idled. I wiped my hands and stepped onto the porch. So I met him on the porch and did not invite him in. Dusk burned gold along the cedar tops when I stepped onto the porch. The doorbell's blue ring pulsed recording. Duran's BMW idled at the cattle guard headlights, flattening the dust. I didn't invite him in. I set my feet shoulder width on the top plank and spoke like I do to a skittish mare. "You may talk from the steps. No yelling, no entry." The house behind me stayed dark except for a single lamp over the table where the envelope lay centered like a dare. He climbed out slowly, holding that same envelope between two fingers as if it weighed a fortune. "It's generous," he said, lifting his chin. "Pack by Sunday." The engine ticked as it cooled. I noted the time, the way his watch flashed, the way his jaw moved before his mouth did. He tipped his head toward the barn, keys to the Mustang. I let my thumb rest on the phone in my apron pocket. The doorbell winked again. I did not argue. I pressed play. Mr. Harrington's speakerphone recording spilled into the evening, Duran's voice flat, and hurried. "We'll split the 75 after closing." It hung there between us like a sheet on the line. Duran's jaw ticked again. He glanced toward the camera and away, calculating angles. I waited. Wind moved the live oaks. A mockingbird called and went quiet. I did not fill the silence. I have learned silence is a tool if you hold it steady. The title halted, I said finally. Sunrise withdrew. The judge denied ex parte. I held the copies waist high so the lens could drink them in, recorded stamp halt email minute order. If you want change file properly, you are not my agent. I kept my voice level the way you speak to a neighbor's dog through a fence firm, not mean. He scoffed and shifted his stance on the gravel. A floorboard creaked behind the screen. Lacey had moved 2 inches to the right like we planned out of camera within earshot. I didn't turn. There is a witness, I said to the air, more than to him. He raised his voice on purpose, as if volume could take the place of rights. The doorbell light glowed on its cycle. Somewhere down the pasture, a heifer lowed for her calf, and the calf answered thin and sure. Joran stepped to the bottom stair toe on the first board. "I can make this hard," he said. "You already have," I answered. "I won't argue on my porch." I tapped the non-emergency number speaker on. "Civil standby," I said to the dispatcher, giving our address, explaining there was no violence, only a boundary. Joran pulled his phone like a pistol and said he'd call 911 first. "Then we'll both wait," I said. "Here, not inside." While we waited, the phone in my pocket vibrated once. Lyle's text preview showed 3 small pictures overhead stills, the angle you get from a careful drone Joran in a roadside booth with a Sunrise Man envelope on the table clock in the frame. I didn't show them. I looked at my son, my boy, who once slept draped over my arm on a metal bleacher, and said, "Council is aware of your off-books meeting." That was all. Sometimes saying less is leaving room for a conscience if one exists. Gravel crackled. Deputy Reed rolled up slow lights off Bodycam Live. He took in the space, me on the top plank, Joran on the bottom stair, the blue ring pulsing. "Evening," he said. "We had calls from both of you." I nodded toward the doorbell. He watched the porch clip the earlier audio read the minute order and last night's incident number. He kept his voice neutral. "To Joran, sir, this is a civil matter. You're being issued a verbal trespass warning for the residents. Do not return without invitation. I'm noting a harassment pattern. To me, ma'am, anything else tonight, no deputy." "Thank you," I said and meant it. There was a long second where pride and sense wrestled across my son's face. Then he backed off the stair. The BMW door thunked shut. The engine turned over. For a breath, I saw the boy who forgot his lunch and the man who sold what he did not own overlap like 2 frames, and then the taillights were red beads moving down the drive. The night rushed in to fill the space he left. Inside the house, exhaled. Lossie stood behind the screen cheek's blotched hands steady. "You kept still," I said. She nodded once. We did not hug. We checked the lock. Checked the camera upload, checked that the clip had saved to the cloud. I sat at the table and drew a neat line in my pad. S12 porch confrontation recorded. Threat and move-out demand on file. S14 drone stills secured time-place companion. S16 trespass warning issued. Harassment noted. CAD timestamp saved. The envelope waited where he had left it. I centered it again with one finger and left it shut. I emailed Marcia doorbell clip, attached Harrington audio, the stills, incident numbers in the subject line. Porch handled. No entry. Warning issued, I wrote. Lacey made tea the old way kettle in patience. We drank it hot, though the night was warm. The cicadas were louder now, like 1,000 clocks set to the same stubborn beat. I let the sound fill me up where fear likes to sit. Before I turned off the lamp, I walked to the threshold and looked out across the pasture. The fence line Robert and I stretched with sore hands and jokes we barely remember. I thought about what ownership means when paper tries to talk louder than a life. I thought about how quiet can be a wall you build without hammering. Then I locked the door and slid the chain, and the house clicked into itself. Link to next chapter. At daybreak, Sunrise's counsel sent a demand letter, and Joran's bank asked about chargebacks. Continuing the content of the previous chapter, I brewed coffee, opened Wesley's PDF, and reached for my pen. Coffee steamed beside the centered envelope while I spread Wesley's PDF across the oak. His diagram traced a straight path to a bad idea. Sunrise escrow to Joran's LLC, a backdated invoice, then a same-day cash withdrawal matching the Mustang deposit. A neat column labeled Sources, Uses, Variance did not forgive the arithmetic. I circled commingled funds and penciled Exhibit W3 on the margin. He had drawn the trail himself. All I did was read it. Sunrise's demand letter arrived dressed in confidence. Retract the easement or face damages. Return all consideration. Cease interference. It pretended not to see the judge's denial or the missing contract between us. I printed it, weighed it, and felt nothing. I forwarded it to Marcia with one sentence: offer them a lifeboat they can live with and a mirror they can't ignore. We built the mirror by the book. 4 points, plain and clean. First, no privity and no authority. No one had my pen on any transfer. Second, Dr. Patel's capacity letter and the wellness incident number from last night. Third, the conservation easement recorded on Tuesday, not rescindable by demand or wish. Fourth, an index of evidence, the access log IP from Joran's office, the expired notary seal, the doorbell audio, and Wesley's exhibits. Marcia set the order. I initialed. Out it went. The bank called before the cup cooled. Mrs. Montgomery Nora Chavez, senior fraud at Lone Star. We've received competing claims tied to your property and the vehicle. May I record, you may, I said. She verified me and asked plainly, had I executed a power of attorney? No. Any bill of sale? No. I cited the minute order, denying guardianship, the title, Halt Sunrise's withdrawal, and the easement stamp. She listened without rushing. You should know, she said, we see indicators of commingling. A provisional freeze may follow while chargebacks are reviewed. She emailed a secure link. I uploaded W3, the buyer's deposit, and the access log printout within the hour. She agreed. Help sometimes wears a collector's polo and good manners. Mr. Harrington sent a short affidavit wire date and time routing and account number screenshots of Joran split the 75 message and the VIN from his purchase agreement. He authorized bank review. I thanked him and confirmed counsel was pursuing his refund from Joran, not from me. Some men of his generation keep words where they do the most work. A state email chimed like a fork on glass. The Notary Commission assigned a docket, 25 NC 1843, and the bonding company asked for my exhibits. I sent the forged deed, the expired commission lookup, and the access log printout with the Austin IP. I wrote the docket on a yellow magnet and clicked it onto the fridge beside the recorded stamp. That corner of metal had become my instrument panel. Glancing there, put my hands steady on the day. The sheriff's fraud unit answered to a preliminary intake number linked to last night's calls. No statements to Joran, the deputy typed route all contact through counsel. I copied that sentence onto my pad in block letters and underlined it twice. By noon, Sunrise stepped back in carefully chosen shoes. We withdraw the demand as to you, Wesley wrote, and will pursue remedies against parties who solicited the sale. In the same note, they requested preservation of evidence. I agreed and attached a preservation letter I had drafted for them. Body cam doorbell clip texts, timestamps, the works. Then I asked for what mattered to the ground under my feet, written confirmation that no agent of theirs would enter the ranch. Confirmed their reply said, I logged the day the way a bookkeeper tallies rain. S15 Wesley map filed, S17 bank freeze, chargeback in motion, S20 buyer affidavit logged, S22 notary docket opened. The envelope stayed mid-table, plain as ever. Outside heat shimmered in the south pasture, and a hawk rode a thermal over the tank. Some things are free because nobody can sell them, and some things stay yours because you learn to write their names where it counts. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome for patience. A wren scolded. By mid-afternoon, another message slid in, soft in tone and hard in shape. Settlement meeting, the subject read Monday, 10 a.m. at your residence. I read it twice and poured the last of the coffee down the sink. Monday would be measured in chairs and sentences. Tonight would be measured in quiet. I set the kettle for tea and watched ink dry where I had pressed too hard. I thought of my mother who kept a ledger of grocery nickels during lean seasons and taught me that numbers can carry you over a flood you cannot touch. I thought of Robert, who never sent a demand letter in his life and still won every boundary he needed by showing up early and leaving late. I would show up on Monday. I would leave last. I pulled a single chair onto the porch and sat where the camera could see me, cup in hand, evening sliding blue over the hills. Lacey texted a heart. I replied with the docket number. She sent back nerd, which is our word for love that wears boots. When the cup cooled, I carried it inside, centered the envelope with one finger, and turned the lamp off. Link to next chapter. By sunset, a settlement meeting invite landed Monday, 10 a.m., my porch. Continuing the content of the previous chapter, I set 3 chairs and 1 boundary. I set 3 chairs on the porch and 1 rule: public porch, only no entry, all words on the record. The doorbell lens blinked its small blue eye. The oak side table held the centered envelope, $11,000 I would not spend, and a legal pad with today's date. Serena arrived in a press suit. Marcia sat to my left, file squared. Joran hovered 1 step down, pretending distance was a choice. Serena opened with logistics. "We're here for a clean resolution." She said, "Palms open. Non-entry for our people, coordination on refunds, and clarity about future contact." I slid a copy of the county's conservation letter and the easement map across the table, the recorded stamp, visible like a red stoplight. "The land is protected," I said. "It isn't a product. No one is coming past that gate." Marcia nodded once. Joran's jaw moved like he was chewing gravel. I put Lyle on speaker. His voice came clean. "We received an internal memo and audio from a Sunrise scout," he said. "Phrases include fast-track elder relocation and sign and ship before resistance forms. Time-stamped last week, chain of custody documented." I wrote the times in my margin and said nothing. Serena's face lost color the way paper does in sun. "That language isn't policy," she said quickly. "It will be addressed internally." "Good," I said. "Address it where it was born." The phone clicked again. Nora from the bank joined, matter of fact. "Provisional freeze remains on Joran's LLC," she said. "Chargeback review is open and we've flagged anomalies tied to the Mustang funds. Please continue preserving communications and recordings." I confirmed. Serena cleared her throat. "For the record, Sunrise will pursue remedies, if any, against parties who solicited this sale. Not Mrs. Montgomery. She finally used my name." I stated my terms once slow enough to write by. First, Joran signs a renunciation and no claim as to the ranch and the car now and later. Second, he issues a written apology to the buyer and agrees to indemnify him for every dollar lost. Third, restitution moves through council and bank, not by text or handshake. Fourth, Sunrise signs a non-entry pledge and withdraws any mention of me from their materials. Fifth, all contact goes lawyer to lawyer. I stopped. The cicadas carried the pause. Joran tried the old lever labeled family. "You can't live here alone," he said, reaching toward the envelope as if it were a prop in a school play. "If I cooperate, I should keep something." I let the porch hold the silence. Then I slid 4 pages forward the minute order denying guardianship, the doorbell transcript, where he promised to split 75 the notary docket showing an expired seal and the county letter backing the easement. "These are the only things I split," I said. He read the room. Serena exhaled like a person choosing the smaller fire. "We can accept the framework," she said. "Non-entry is confirmed. We'll preserve evidence. Mutual non-disparagement limited to the facts as recorded." Marcia lifted a tabbed folder and produced a draft with signature lines that waited without impatience. "We anticipated your acceptance," she said. Serena almost smiled at the efficiency and then remembered the memo on Lyle's recorder. We signed where our names belonged. Serena first, her pen steady. Marcia as witness. Joran last, his signature narrower than the one on the forged sale. I initialed each page and pressed the paper flat with my palm. Then I picked up the envelope and pushed it toward my son. "You'll need this to start making people whole," I said. No lecture, no blessing. He took it without triumph and without thanks. That, too, went into the day's account. Serena stood and smoothed her sleeve. "You have our non-entry pledge in writing," she said. "A courier will bring the final copies this afternoon. Leave them at the gate," I said. "The camera will see them before I do." She gave a professional nod. Marcia packed the folder, checked the recorder light, and squeezed my shoulder like a gavel you can carry in a pocket. When the cars rolled away, the porch returned to ordinary light. I wrote the line that mattered most. S-23 Porch Memorandum. Executed renunciation restitution apology. No contact. S-21 County backing affirmed. I added a smaller note for myself, S18 inside tape logged. Speak softly, keep it. Wind shifted from the tank. Somewhere, a gate latch clicked as metal cooled. Before they left, Marcia read the terms aloud one more time, so no one could claim fog later. Renunciation signed, indemnity to buyer signed, non-entry pledged, restitution plan routed through council and bank, contact through attorneys only. Each clause sounded like a fence post set in concrete. Joran stared past the pasture as if a different road might appear if he refused to blink. It didn't. A mockingbird tried on the ring of our voices and then settled back into its own song. The doorbell lens caught his profile, the pen in his hand, and the moment he chose, I brewed fresh coffee and took it back outside. 3 chairs, 1 boundary. The house felt taller by an inch, the way a person does after standing through their own weather. I did not feel victorious. I felt correct. The difference is the quiet. Link to next chapter. By noon, the heat shimmered white, and the ranch truck quit on me. Continuing the content of the previous chapter, I chose the back pasture anyway. Noon heat trembled above the broomweed, the horizon moving like a mirage. The ranch truck coughed twice and died where the lane bent toward the south fence. I popped the hood. Steam lifted in thin ghosts and a belt slapped the shroud idler, most likely. I logged my location the way Robert taught me, windmill to the east, a lone live oak to the south, the shallow wash running like a crease between them. I locked the cab, took my hat, a half bottle of water, and the small radio. The sun pressed a palm between my shoulder blades. I sipped once, not twice, and planned a triangle shade first, then the fence span. I had promised myself I would check since spring. Then the lane where a neighbor might pass. Grasshoppers rasped like matches. Every 20 steps, I counted my breaths to 5, then again to 5, keeping my stride small, and even so, I didn't spend what I could not get back. The world went 2 bright edges haloed, as if the light had been sanded. I sat on a limestone rock, counted to 60, checked my pulse like a nurse had shown me after Robert's surgery. 2 fingers, not the thumb patient. Honest. I texted Lacey a simple line truck down South Line, watched the screen flash a temperature warning, and go black. The wind forgot us. I stood and aimed for the oak. I don't remember kneeling. I remember the old trick hat for shade back to the sun, make yourself small, and breathe through the nose, not the mouth. The hat wouldn't stay. My hands shook. 30 paces to shadow. I made it 15. Heat came up through my jeans from the ground like a quiet fire. Somewhere far off, a motor hummed, then cut out. Cicadas took the silence apart, long saw strokes across the day. Boots scuffed the gravel of the 2-track. Mom. The voice was hoarse and close. Joran. He smelled of sunblock and worry. Don't move. He said the old bossiness of a first-grade safety patrol returning for something useful. A cold pack pressed beneath each arm, a bottle at my lips, not too fast. He slid his arms under me and stood legs shaking, but sure. And in that moment, I felt the old boy inside the man he has been trying so hard to perform. The truck cab blasted air. He turned the vents toward my wrists and neck. Paramedics came in a dust cloud and a soft competence. Blood pressure, pupils, questions, heat exhaustion, not stroke. We'd like to transport, one said. I weighed the ride and shook my head only after I heard the plan for electrolytes. A cool room, a check within the hour, a return if anything changed. I signed refusal with a steady hand while Joran answered what they needed without bluster. When they spread a damp towel across my shoulders, he asked, "Are you mad?" I called. "I'm grateful you did," I said. Gratitude is not forgiveness. He heard the difference. Back at the farmhouse porch, the shade felt like permission. Ice at my neck, salt on my tongue, the doorbell lens a quiet blue eye above us. Joran lingered on the top step the way a boy lingers after breaking a window. "I'll fix the fence," he offered. "Not tonight," I said. Dawn. "And you don't step inside. Porch only. We keep the settlement terms as written." He swallowed and nodded. We let the cicadas do the talking for a while. Practical things first. He arranged a tow for the ranch truck and ordered an idler and belt to the parts store under my account. He left the receipt on the porch table with a note in the handwriting I used to grade on spelling tests I'll install at first light. No flourish, no plea. He returned the cold packs to the cooler and stood hands on his hips looking at the fence line like a man calculating posts and wire instead of angles and leverage. Inside the kitchen held its anchors as if they were a compass. The envelope with $11,000 centered on the table. The legal pad square to the edge. The first page of the conservation easement under the fridge magnet that says, recorded in plain black type. I sat and wrote a single clean line, S24 heat carry boundaries intact, then the time, then the temperature, then the paramedic unit number and the name stitched on their shirts. Evidence beats volume. It always has. I walked back to the porch and found Joran sitting on the step, elbows on knees. He looked at the house like a traveler looks at a closed gate. I'll be here before the birds, he said. Good, I said. Use the north gate. The cows won't crowd you there. He almost smiled. It didn't reach far, but it reached. We watched as the tow truck took my pickup toward town. The driver tipped his cap. Joran stood and wiped his palms on his jeans in a movement so familiar it ached. He didn't ask to come in. I didn't offer. He climbed into his BMW and let it idle a moment, then shut it off again and walked back to the porch with a bottle of sport drink from his cooler. He set it on the table and pushed it toward me like a piece with no label on it. I nodded and left it standing. The heat finally bent. Shadows lengthened across the yard in bands. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked and then decided against it. I folded the damp towel and laid it flat to dry over the rail. The porch boards held the day's warmth the way an old hand holds a secret. Link to next chapter. At dawn, a post driver rang from the north fence. Continuing the content of the previous chapter, he started before the birds. Yes. At gray dawn, I found Joran already at the north fence. Sleeves rolled the weak span we flagged yesterday, stretched between two new posts. He kept to the porch rule, even in pasture light tools set where I could see them receipts clipped under a magnet on the truck visor. We worked in parallel. He hammered. I held wire with my gloves, pinching tight. No speeches, just the clean rhythm of work and breath. When the line stood straight, we checked tension twice and tamped the last soil with our heels. I tipped my hat and told him to change. We were due at the courthouse. In the hallway outside records, the air smelled of paper and floor wax, a smell I've known since Robert and I filed our marriage license. Marcia reviewed our packet on a bench, the conservation easement numbers my affidavit, and a notarized acknowledgement Joran had agreed to sign. Sunrise's counsel arrived with a polite frown and a last-ditch objection about public interest. I let the lawyers argue. I watched my son's jaw work, then ease. He asked the clerk for an extra form on his own, not prompted. Inside the hearing room, the commissioner took filings with the patience of a man who knows paper outlives tempers. Marcia was crisp. I offered 3 sentences about stewardship and sleep. Then Joran stepped forward. He admitted the forgeries outlined restitution and renounced any claim to the ranch or the Mustang. His voice didn't break. The clerk stamped each page, time, date book, and number. Sunrise's counsel spoke for the record, withdrawing their objection. No applause, that was fine. Some turns don't need a stage, only a stamp. In the parking lot, he held out the worn envelope. This belongs where it should have gone. I took it, then placed it in Lacey's hands when she pulled up between classes. Seed money, I told her, for the land steward scholarship we talked about. 1 student a year who keeps water clean and fences honest. Joran nodded once. A clean cut, not a plea. Lacey tucked the envelope under her notebook like a fragile bird and left for campus with the windows down. Back at the barn, dust motes spun in a shaft of sun. Lacey and I folded the cover off the cherry-red Mustang and stood quiet a moment. I pressed a second key into her palm. This car is a story, not an asset, I said. We idled to the end of the lane and back. Joran stood aside near the cottage cap in hand. No ride offered, none requested. The engine note sounded like Robert's laugh in metal. I parked it under cover. By noon, the yard filled with neighbors and dishes. Shanann set out iced tea while I brought the easement sign from the shop, conserved in perpetuity in black on white. Joran and I lifted it together at the lane and tightened the last bolt. He stepped back so I could speak. "Thank you for standing with the land," I said. "May we deserve it." Applause came small and clean, the kind you hear after a hymn rather than a fight. In the afternoon, we stopped by Marcia's office for signatures and the therapist's door for the scheduled check-in documents filed sessions to taper boundaries to hold. On the drive home, I changed the gate code and at my desk texted it to Joran with hours for access and the chores he'd volunteered for fence inspections at Dawn Water checks on Wednesday's hay delivery on the 1st of the month. His reply came back simple. "Understood, not thanks, not yet. Progress is a ledger you balance slowly." Dusk settled in and cicadas tried their best to saw the heat apart. I opened the legal pad and wrote the final line for this chapter of my life. Posts set. Ranch held. Family under repair. I moved to the fridge and pinned today's stamped page beside the old recorded first sheet, a private museum of dates and decisions. The $11,000 now sat as a scholarship entry in my budget folder, not as a taunt in the center of the table. The Mustang slept red starlight under canvas. Before the light faded, an email from the county dinged my phone. The easement map had posted to the public viewer pin and book, visible to anyone with a browser. The clerk attached a one-line confirmation restrictions run with the land and a scanned notice for the bulletin board. Lacey replied with a draft of the scholarship page and a list of local teachers to help choose recipients. Sunrise sent a final courtesy note, escrow unwind in process, no personnel to enter without written consent. On the porch, I poured one glass of iced tea and set a second on the top step. The door stayed open behind me. The boundary stayed the same. If Joran wanted the tea, he could ask. If he didn't, it would sweat in the Texas dark and run in the boards like a brief summer creek. The ranch would endure either way, held by paper, and people who kept their word when it counted. I listened for footsteps and for the far familiar thrum of the pump kicking on in the well house. Wind eased. Whip-poor Will's tuned air. An owl took the fence post we'd set at dawn and blinked at me unimpressed. I laughed once low and tipped my glass to the bird, to the land, and to whatever mending takes root when speech gives way to work. Behind me, the screen door creaked and stilled. I didn't turn until I heard the lightest knock, 3 careful taps on the frame, a boy's rhythm in a man's hand. I lifted the second glass without a word. Some reconciliations begin exactly there, on a porch at dusk, with tea and rules that hold. When I look back on this week, I don't hear shouting. I hear paper being stamped and boundaries set. I learned that love without limits turns into leverage for others, but love with rules can save a family and a piece of land. If you're facing pressure, document first, argue last, and let time and truth do their work. What would you protect if no one clapped for you? Have you ever had to draw a line with someone you love? Tell me where you're watching from and what this story stirred in you. If this reached you, type 1 in the comments or tell me why it didn't. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories of quiet strength and share this with someone who needs a steady voice today. Be well, my son, slid an envelope across my kitchen table and told me it was transition. Money, just $11,000 for the $4.8 million ranch, and my car he had already sold behind my back. My chest ached, but years of sacrifice steadied my hands as I folded that envelope like evidence. Instead of pleading, I walked out into the Texas sun to start a paper trail that could not be erased. He had no idea this was only the opening move of a much bigger game. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from.